So we are live. We're just waiting for it to be confirmed that it is live on YouTube. Just takes a couple of secs for it to connect to it. That's good. We're good. We are good.
Great, thank you so much. So good morning to everyone, and welcome to our meeting on this beautiful day. And I hope you'll be able to enjoy the afternoon after we get our meeting finished. I just want to announce that once again about the Mad River Benefit Concert that will be happening this Sunday, if anyone has the opportunity to join that. So this morning, our land acknowledgement will be shared by Councillor Baines from Collingwood. So I will turn it over to Councillor Baines, if you would.
Great. Thank you, Chair. The Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority Board acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishwabic people. The Anishwabic include the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people.
Thank you very much. So this morning, I would like to just take a moment to acknowledge our newest member, Councillor Clark from Mulmer. She's replacing Mayor Horner. So welcome to our group, and we look forward to getting to know you better.
Thanks, Gail. Me too.
So I believe that we have regrets from Councillor Harvey and Mayor White, who are both traveling. I don't know that anyone else has given notice, but we're good to go. We have quorum, so we'll carry on. Could I have a motion put forward? Now on my agenda it says Councillor Mangtelo, but I don't see him here yet. Is he here? No. Okay.
He was.
Oh, he was.
Looks like he's popped out though.
Okay. Well, let's just I see oh, there's Councillor Mangtelo. So we have Councillor Mangtelo and seconded by Mayor Scott that the agenda for the Board of Director meeting of number 0424 BOD dated May the 24th, 2024 be approved. Is there any discussion on that motion? If not, I would ask that you go to your onboard voting to cast your ballot to approve that motion.
Members, that motion has carried.
Okay, well, that's very quick. I didn't even get to pass mine. Okay. We have no announcements today that I'm aware of, and no presentations, but we do have a deputation. I would like to welcome Pamela Spence, who is here to talk about the Nottawasaga Bay watercourse. So welcome, Pamela, and you have approximately 10 minutes for your presentation, so I will turn it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. Hope you can hear me all right.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the ability to speak to you today about this matter. I live on Nottawasaga Bay, and I have noticed some degradation of the water in front of me, so I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I've made this presentation to Gray Sawbill Conservation Authority and the Town of Blue Mountains and the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. And I hope to present to Grey County and Georgian Bay Forever in the near future. Next slide, please. Thank you. We admire the Bay very much and, use it in promotional literature. And we take pride in speaking to it as sparkling Georgian Bay waters, clear waters, crystal clear waters, pristine waters. But I'm here today to show you that in many cases, that's not true. Next slide, please. This is North Winds Beach, which is the publicly accessible beach at the foot of Grey Road 19 in Georgian Bay on June 26th. We have found that last summer, particularly, I've been away for most of April and a little bit of May, so I'm not sure how it's threatened today, but this has been an ongoing problem last summer. Next, please. So I live right there, Craigleith, between Grey Road 19 to the left and 21 Grey Road 21 to the right. And within that small stretch, there are 14 watercourses. Next, please. Some of them are, unused culverts, etc., but there are significant watercourses there. Many of my neighbors have noted the degradation in the water and have written to the town. And the town says that working with the conservation authorities and the developers to improve this, but it starts above the development projects. Next slide, please. Just providing some examples of how dirty the water is. This is April 2023, last summer. Next, please. Showing it continuing into June, to the end of June, and into July. Very fast, turbid waters. Next slide, please. Stretching way out into the bay. This is the July hot, long weekend. We weren't able to go on the water because it was so full of mud and sediment right into the middle of July. Next slide, please. I was very fortunate 2 summers ago to fly with a friend in a small plane. And I just wanted to show you that in the bay at the bottom, that's Nottawasaga Bay, you can see the banks of sandbars and silt that's dropping there. And it's a good view to show you the landscape. We've got the escarpment in the far distance there. And then there's below the escarpment, there's some tableland. And then you'll see a green ribbon, which is the Nipissing Ridge. And then it drops down again. So a lot of the watercourses start at the top of the escarpment and continue down. So some is post-development runoff, some is stormwater runoff, and some is new development runoff. Next slide, please. The town of Blue Mountains has its drainage master plan going on at the moment. I've just captured a couple of the pictures that pertain to the area I'm talking about. These watercourses are rampant. This is probably a 1 kilometer, maybe 1.5 kilometer distance. So it's intensively serviced by these watercourses, and it conveys all the water to the bay. Next slide, please. This is just some information from 2 of the developments that are ongoing now in the area. It shows you that of the 5 watercourses there, some of them have over 80 hectares of watershed and stretch from the escarpment at the base of the escarpment right out to the bay. So these, as I said, are sort of post-development and new development implications here. Next slide, please. This is watercourse 11 or 14. It's called 14, but there's only really 11 active ones. So this outflows at North Winds Beach. These 3 pictures are within, 50 feet of the beachfront. And you can see the turbidity in the water, the sediment in the water. Next slide, please. And again, this was a video, but it doesn't seem to show up in the PowerPoints. But it was meant to span the bottom of the bay and show you that way out into the far distance, you can see the sediment, and it flows right down to the right, which is at the bottom of Nottawasaga Bay. Next slide, please. This is watercourse 10, which starts at Craigleith Ski Club And you can see on the left, this is in the end of April or middle of April, so it's a snow melt and it flows down and, has a natural wetland, which may or may not be replaced by new development now. But then on the right, you see at the end of June, there's still this brown muddy water coming off of the slopes. It's not just a spring occurrence. Next slide, please. This is water course 9, which is very close to me, 2 properties away. And again, it starts from the Craigley Ski Club, rushes down with heavy bed load and velocity, and goes out through a municipal drain. The pictures on the right and left are in June. So again, heavy sediment throughout the summer. Next slide. This is water course 7, which starts at the picture on the right, is at the north end of the Blue Mountain Resort behind the Toronto Ski Club. They were doing some work on their snowmaking equipment, and the silt fencing was not effective at all, in my opinion. It ended up going out through a ditch and down to the water course, which is the small picture in the middle. Next slide, please. So this is the end of June, the same water course 7, just as it passes under Georgian Trail and then out to the bay. Next slide, please. So my concern is that there has been significant increase in the quantity and velocity of the runoff in the particularly last summer and noticeable the summer before. With this heavy runoff is heavy sedimentation and erosion possibly coming from as far away as the escarpment. The waters were so turbid last summer. This is August 4th in the picture on the left. You couldn't see your feet below the water. Then the concern is what's in that runoff. With reduced winters, there's more reliance on snowmaking, and I'm concerned about what the chemicals are. Some of those chemicals have been banned in Europe, and snowmaking has been under study there. There's been increased algae and aquatic weeds, which my friends can attest to. At the bottom of the bay, they have massive cleanup in the spring. If this runoff continues, there's potential for degradation of the beaches and potential closures of the shoreline. There are these plumes, as I've illustrated, extend way out into the bay, and I'm concerned about the consequences on aquatic wildlife and boaters as well. It's a very shallow and rocky bay, and you may not be able to see the bottom if it's so heavily sedimented. And the Town of Blue Mountain's official plan review, in one of its background studies, says we can anticipate more runoff and can increased erosion due to climate change. Next slide, please. So I'm here to identify these issues and to ask that the conservation authorities help with studying and understanding what we can do to reduce the erosion. That requires strengthening policies and reviewing policies and strengthening them to see if we can change the mantra from convey the water to the bay to clean the water before it goes into the bay. I would ask that the conservation authorities, work together with the municipality to study and monitor the water courses. And this could extend over to as far as the town line. The town line water course does flow right into Georgian Bay at Long Point Road. So again, it's the far east side of Nottawasaga Bay. Should be studying the causes and speed and volume of the runoff. And then I know that there are many of these water courses are designated hazard lands in their planning. And when they were before councils and the Conservation Authority, there was adjustments made to the 30-meter setback, which was in the policies. If we continue to enforce the 30-meter setback, then we can have additional land area for tree planting and protection and help reduce erosion. And then when the permits are granted, I would ask that there is more attention paid to buffering from erosion, increasing the use of hay bales and erosion socks and other erosion control blankets and cocoa rolls, etc. So I appreciate your attention to this, and I'll just close by saying I was reviewing your staff report coming up later, and was appreciative of hearing that erosion hazards are a joint responsibility of the conservation authorities and the municipalities, and their duty is to reduce, minimize, and prevent increased stormwater volume, and along with that, erosion and pollution. So I appreciate you listening, and I'd welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Pamela, for your interest in this and your concerns that you're sharing with us, and your efforts in making us all aware of what's happening there. Do any of the members of the board have questions? Councillor Baines. Oh, sorry. I also see you, Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Spence, you've hit a lot of hot buttons for me. I've been a member of Craigley Ski Club since 1962 and know these streams and know the escarpment and quite aware of the runoff and the volume of runoff coming off the mountain. But my question specifically is, have you or do you or would you in the future photograph similar plumes out into the bay as a result of, say, the January melt or the February melt or increasing melts throughout the winter season, unfortunately, due to climate change? And if you do document those, are they as extensive as the ones you've shown in June, July, and August?
Thank you for your question, and through the chair, if I can answer.
Absolutely.
I would have to go back into my cell phone library. I do have some historical pictures beyond this summer of 2023 that I recorded. It's hard to judge whether they are as extensive. I will say that I believe in the winter months, because we have melt and freeze, it slows down the volume that is actually running off, and slows it into the water courses and out into the bay, because again, it has an opportunity to sort of freeze along the way. So I don't believe the velocity of the runoff is as great, but I have not studied it, and that's my concern, is that there should be somebody addressing this and trying to determine what the issues really are.
I would agree, but certainly it is my memory since 1962 that these plumes are a regular occurrence. And the challenge of trying to mitigate that, certainly on the slopes of the escarpment, is going to be quite something. But thank you for your presentation.
And just again, you asked about January, February. I do agree that in April and maybe late March, you can find these extensive plumes. And, it is a spring occurrence that way. But the snowmaking, to my understanding, it has 60% more water content than natural snow, which is like 15%. So the volume of water that's actually coming off in this now artificial snow melt is greater. And again, my concern was really in the summer that this is continuing to occur with climate change and increased rainfall.
I would agree. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Porter?
Yes, and I'll lower my hand here. Thank you very much, Pamela. And I've certainly heard your presentation at the Town of Blue Mountains, and I heard it went very well at Grey Sabo from our representative there. I was going to actually bring up about the significant increase in water content when artificial snow is made, and increasingly because of climate change, we may well see increased snow making facilities. And as the technology has improved, they're able to make it at temperatures closer to zero as opposed to before. So it is significant. And the rate of development in the Craigley area below the escarpment is at an accelerated rate. It is where the majority of development is going on now. And with that becomes increasingly lack of impervious services. And yes, well, the engineers feel they can engineer themselves out of anything. It does have an impact. And so certainly I do think there is there is a need to look at this. I would also say maybe there's an opportunity because the Blue Mountain shares two conservation authorities. There's an opportunity for both authorities to work together with the municipalities to see how we can best approach this. So I'd just like to leave that. Thank you. And thank you again, Pamela.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Giesbrink.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I'm just trying to establish relevance. So just two questions. A, I guess, what is the direct ask of the NVCA? And B, our watershed and regulation area starts at roughly Silver Creek, which is significantly east of the examples and of Long Point. So I'm not sure, again, just trying to establish relevance to NVCA in our area versus being a part of the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority area. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can answer?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I do understand that NVCA has a smaller role to play in this community, but as Councillor Porter just demonstrated, you know, there is an ability for the conservation authorities to work together to create policies. And I will say that the improvements made to the Town Line Creek on Gray Road 21 are a fine example of things that can be done to mitigate the velocity and sedimentation that some of these streams contain. And perhaps that kind of forward thinking can be shared with the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority, and the learnings that you have and the fine staff that you have can work together with the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority. And together, I always feel that this is a regional area. None of the counties or the municipalities or the conservation authorities really should be working in silos or by themselves, because we share so much of the landscape. And the residents don't see the lines between the conservation authorities or the counties or the towns. So we look to our experts to help us in all of these matters that we are facing. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Further questions, Councillor Giesbrink?
No, thank you, Chair.
Great. Okay, thank you. Councillor Lougheed.
Thank you. Yes, it's okay. No, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Pamela, for the presentation. Very detailed and eye-opening, actually. And what I was hoping to do is invite you to make the same presentation delegation to my council at the municipality of Grey Highlands, because we are, of course, being the Highlands, we're upstream of a lot of this, and in particular Lake Eugenia and the Beaver River. And this is quite timely in that we're talking about some fairly major developments adjacent to the Beaver River, which are at the moment quite contentious, as you can imagine. So I would very much like if you could come and present exactly this information to Grey Highlands Council as soon as possible, actually, in that the developments are, the deliberation around the developments are now. And I think that this would be very valuable information for our council to receive when talking about, not just our watershed, our municipality, but the effects that that the development within our municipality has downstream of us as well. So thank you very much.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for the invite. I would be more than pleased to speak. I am around, other than the second week in July or June, I am available at your disposal.
Feel free, if I can, feel free to contact me if we can chat here or however we can get in touch, but feel free to send me an email and I'll help you along the way with the delegation.
I'll be happy to do that. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Vice Chair Scott.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think you're touching on important issues that certainly do affect all of us in the region, regardless of the exact boundaries. And so I think that was a very important point you raised. I'm more familiar with this issue on the Lake Simcoe side of my life, being from Bradford, where we're aggressively trying to limit phosphorus runoff into the lake, both through a recycling facility, but also through some other measures with riparian plantings and shoreline stabilization that can naturally filter out some of the pollution running off of urban development, even agriculture, though I think our farmers have done a fair bit of work over the past decade on the farm to reduce fertilizer or what have you flowing into our water. The main culprit seems to be urban development, and that is a problem to different degrees throughout our region. When it comes to Georgian Bay and the Nottawasaga Valley watershed more particularly, I think there is some good news in terms of federal funding for the Great Lakes and freshwater. Our board was advocating for that about a year ago, and when I was in Ottawa through Conservation Ontario about 2 weeks ago, the Americans were quite pleased that Canada's finally stepping back up to the plate in terms of Great Lakes protection. So perhaps there's funding through, I think it's about $400 million for the Great Lakes, including Georgian Bay and the surrounding area that we could access there. So those are just a few comments I have. Algae blooms in the lake has been a concern forever, whether the water levels are high or low. The over fertilization of the lake and the algae blooms that result are probably the most visible, other than low water levels that we see. Rather than rambling anymore, though, I just wanted to ask if our CAO wanted to comment on what our staff at the NVCA might already be doing, or things that we could do going forward to address the concerns you've raised.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps we'll go to our CAO after we have the other questions. So I do see that Councillor Clark has a question.
Right.
Or comment.
I have a quick question for Pamela. Thanks, Gail. Pamela, I'm wondering how long have you noticed this issue with the water? Is it fairly recent, or has it been going on for many, many years? And why I'm asking, do you feel that it is related to the changing in the way that the ski hills are producing the snow, and or is it the new development? Like I'm sort of wondering how long it's been going on, and if we can relate it to what the issues are that have changed to cause this the issue with the water.
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I can answer.
Absolutely.
I have lived here for about 10 years, full time. Prior to that, I was a seasonal resident. So I would have to say that last summer was the most noticeable for sure. And it extended well into the summer season. There were incidences of year or two priors where there were days where, again, the sedimentation plume stretched way out, but it wasn't as frequent as last year. And again, there is some relationship to the work that was being done at the ski hills. So, whether it continues to be as frequent is really dependent on the weather. We had some tremendous storms last summer. And the concern is that these storms will be repeated, and therefore this will be a continuous problem. And it sacrifices the use and the fun and the enjoyment of the bay for residents as well as for the aquatic life. So again, I'm not a scientist, I'm a planner and an environmentalist and a business graduate. So I look at this from, multiple lenses, but I haven't studied it scientifically.
And I wasn't looking at that. It was more, I didn't know how long this issue had been going on. And if it had been several years, and trying to determine what the town was doing and that sort of thing. So it's a newer occurrence from certainly the magnitude of this issue than what it was a few years ago. So thank you very much. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Porter, I see your hand, but I'm going to come back to you as well. So Mayor Anderson, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Just a comment, you mentioned that you made this presentation to several municipalities and the Conservation Authority. What has been the response, or has there been any action taken from this municipality to actually deal with this issue? Or have they given you any information on that?
Thank you for your question, if I may, Madam Chair. The town of Blue Mountains was the first one to whom I made the presentation, and I will concur that there was extreme interest. There was a budget item in their 2024 budget planning to study this, but it was dependent on some federal funding. And I was told recently that that federal funding was not available. So I'm pursuing things with them to not let this issue die. The Gray Sabo Conservation Authority had it on their agenda just Tuesday. And their report was not as favorable as I expected. They were concerned about the changes to Bill 185, I believe it is, 183. And some of the changes to their powers, I guess you will. But I have, I was attending that virtually, and I have comments to submit back to them to see if we could actually get some of these water courses on one of their 35 water courses that they're studying. So again, if there was support from the NVCA, you know, I think this could move ahead more significantly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Porter, and then I will go to our CAO.
Thank you very much, and through the chair. So just to Pamela, I'm sorry, I had heard that it was favorably received and possibly working with the municipality with bylaws. So I will go back and check my sources with that. I'd just like to add, just because I've seen some comments saying about the boundaries of the Nottawasaga and how that may impact. I would just like to note how, you know, my experience with water movement in the Georgian Bay. So there was a significant fire in Meaford some time ago, and we had rubber come up on shoreline close to where I live, which is easily 10 to 15 kilometers away. So the water does move within Georgian Bay. So I think, you know, water doesn't realize the boundaries of where the conservation areas have. So I think it's also looking at taking this in the context of the Georgian Bay and this area as an entire system, and that it can have impacts beyond boundaries because it really doesn't know that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam
Okay,
Chair, could I just
sure. Sorry.
comment too? Sorry, and Councillor Porter, you are correct. There was consideration given to working with the town of Blue Mountains to develop some bylaws and such. I had hoped there would be a little more exuberance, if you will, to add it to one of the water courses that were studied. So that's a little bit of a homework I have to do with them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. CAO Hefner?
That's through the chair, if I may. Pamela, thanks so much for your opportunity to come and speak today. We met Pamela after we presented our budget to Blue Mountain, and she approached both Tim, the CAO of Gray Sabo, and I, and we were probably both a little tardy getting back here right away, but I'm very happy you came today. From a perspective of legislation and changes and some of the wording, full disclosure, we've reviewed and participated with Gray Sabo on their staff report. I had several conversations with Tim on the staff report he was preparing. There are legislative changes, like as far as water quality, we're pretty much out of the game of water quality now, which is really impactful in this because that deals with that runoff feature that's on the snow hill itself. So that speaks to one of the changes in legislation. Some of the other factors that we deal with in the monitoring aspect is dollars. Like it's that budget crunch. Like the funding that Vice Chair Scott spoke to. We've applied, made application for a joint project looking at from Tobermory all the way down across to the end of our catchment in Wasaga Beach. We haven't heard back on that yet. And we approached that on not just the Georgian Bay and Lake Huron, but on all the Great Lakes except Superior this year. So we're trying to, when we can, to make those moves. We're going to review and prepare some comments for our staff, for our board on this topic, and we'll share the information that we shared from Gray Sabo as well. So that's what I have, Chair Little. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any further questions or comments from any board members? I don't see any. So we do have a proposed resolution here, moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Porter, that the Board of Directors receive the deputation as presented. If I could ask you then to go to your on-board to cast your vote. Oh, I should ask if there's any discussion first. I'm sorry, but I don't see any. So if you could go to your on-board and cast your vote, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Through the chair, that vote is carried.
Great. Thank you so very much for being here today, Pamela, and for your presentation. As you can see that there is great interest in our water and its future. So thank you for taking that time and for your concern and for carrying on with your sharing of that information. So
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me the time. And if there's some progress, I'd love to report back later, or changes or things like that. And I will get in touch with Mr. Lahi. And if I may, can I attend for listening to the reports that are coming up?
oh, you are most welcome. Absolutely.
Thank you.
To stay on and to be, yes, thank you. So we do have the next item on our agenda is hearings. We have none today. So the rest of their items are dealt with through our consent list agenda. And right now, I don't have a record of any items being pulled. So I would ask board members, are there any items in the consent agendas that anyone wishes to have pulled? So unfortunately, Pamela, this might not be a very exciting discussion day. So we have a closed session following this meeting, but we will deal with the consent agenda as one item. Just before we do that, I see that Greg Merrick is online. He's new to our organization, so could we just say a quick hello to Greg if that's possible? And welcome. I don't believe you've been online before, so I'd just like to say welcome and thank you for joining us. And you're joined us as a senior planner, and I wish you well. And I'm sorry you didn't get to because of the consent agenda. No one has pulled your reports, so I'm sorry that you don't get to answer any of our questions today. But just I'm sure there will be more down the road.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Happy to be here.
Okay, thank you. So Joe, did you have something, Councillor Blanchet?
Yes, through the chair, and because we do have a guest with us, I guess it would be appropriate to note the general concern of some of the changes in legislation that limits the power of the NVCA, and certainly even in more significant cases allows the ministry to overrule the decisions of the NVCA. So I'm sure there is concern and there is advocacy that we, on individual cases, I guess, continue to lobby aggressively to do what's right for the environment. I think that the items probably weren't pulled because we've had quite a bit of discussion on this before, and but I certainly wanted our guests to know that the board is very concerned about the changes in legislation, and it's something that we will continue to look at. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So we then go to our resolution, which is item 11. So we have it moved by Deputy Mayor Paul Van Staveren, seconded by Councillor Christopher Baines. Resolved that so no items were identified as regarding separate discussion. So further, that all consent list agenda items not referred for separate discussion be adopted as submitted to the board, and staff be authorized to take all necessary action required to give effect to the same. And further, that any items in the consent list not referred for separate discussion and for which conflict has been declared are deemed not to have been voted on or discussed by the individual making the declaration. Is there any further discussion on that motion? If not, I would ask that you go to your onboard and submit your vote.
Through the chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. So that brings us down to number 13, other business. Is there any other business for our public agenda? We do have the closed session coming up. I don't see any. So we will then move to the resolution to move into closed. I have a motion by Councillor Christopher Baines, seconded by Councillor Mangtalo. Resolved at this meeting of the Board of Directors number 0424 BOD, move into closed session at 9:42 to address matters pertaining to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the authority, and personal information regarding an identifiable individual, including authority staff. And further, that the Chief Administrative Officer, Director of Corporate Services, the Director of Watershed Science, the Director of Conservation Services, the Manager of Development Planning and Permits and Engineering Services, and the Administrative Assistant be in attendance for recording and speaking purposes for an item A, and further, that the Director of Corporate Services be in attendance for recording and speaking purposes for item B. I hear some background noise, maybe from Councillor Mangtalo.
Hi.
Sorry. Great, thank you. So if there's any discussion on that item, if not, we will go to on board to cast your vote.
Okay, through the chair, that motion has carried.